Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Hi everyone, this is Wendy, and I'm checking in from a gorgeous beach in Wailea on the island of Maui in Hawaii. So I'm very sorry that I'm not part of the discussion in today's podcast, but I just wanted to check in and let you hear a little bit of the ocean waves here because it's incredible. And to thank Allison and Mike for taking the reins this week and for having a very interesting and spirited discussion for you. So I will be back next week, but please enjoy today's topic and enjoy the sound of the Pacific Ocean right here behind me from Hawaii. And I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to investigate any haunted or paranormal places because this has truly been just a relaxing vacation. And I thought maybe I'd see a UFO or something because the skies are so clear, but alas, not on this trip, so I guess I'll have to come back to Hawaii again and see if I can experience some of the paranormal side of Hawaii. But for now, I'm going to hand it off to Mike and Allison. Thanks again, guys, for taking this week's show, and I will talk to you next week. Have a great one, everybody.
It is a beautiful day in Madison, Wisconsin today. I am podcasting outside, and I'm so excited to be able to podcast outside because it's been a long winter, and spring is finally here.
Yay!
Wendy is on vacation, so we are doing this podcast today. It is Allison Jorlin from Milwaukee Ghosts joining us again. Hello, Allison.
Hello! Hello, Mike. Hello, everyone in podcast land.
And it's nice to have you back with us today, Allison.
Oh, thank you.
And you haven't been on a podcast for a little while. How have you been?
Well, it's been winter. It's been a lot of flu and cold, and I have a head cold right now. So you're outside, but I'm stuck inside with a box of Kleenexes.
Okay.
And sorrow.
Oh.
Oh,
well,
if I get to do the podcast, though, that's fun.
Yes. So, thank you for joining us on your sick day.
No problem.
So, cool things we can talk about. Last week, you weren't so sick, and you were in Madison, and we were at Wizard World.
Yeah, I was just a different kind of sick, right? Her performance on stage was sick. Did you hear those weird stories that she was telling?
And those were some pretty good weird stories. And we were on a panel called Paranormal Wisconsin, hosted by our friend T. Krulos from the Milwaukee Paranormal Convention.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we'll put a link to that because Alice and I are going to be on panels at the Milwaukee Paranormal Conference this year in October, and we'll talk more about that when we get a little bit closer to the date. But how do you feel about your first experience at Wizard World? What'd you think about the con?
Well, I thought it was a lot of fun. I loved all the different costumes, and so that was really fun for me to just see people's creativity and how it was running wild. It was just rampant, and it was just fun to see so many people dressed up like Doctor Who and his many different incarnations.
There were a ton of Doctor Who's. Really were a lot of Doctor Who's. I think you can do Doctor Who because it's not that different than a normal outfit. You know what I mean?
Well, that's right. I mean, it takes some style, of course, but it wasn't to the level of one of our favorite costumes there, which was the Predator.
Oh my God, there was a female Predator too. I didn't even know they had female Predators.
Yeah, I didn't see the female Predator.
So, but the Predator was pretty awesome. It looked like it was out of the movie.
Yeah, like it just stepped off the screen. Amazing.
Right. So I ran. When I saw that, I ran because I knew I'd get that. Those three little dots when the Predator gets you in your sights. I was expecting to see that on my chest or whatever, and end up like Carl Weathers did
Oh no.
in the original movie.
No one should ever go out like that. That was bad.
No.
Still haunts my dreams.
Yeah, so think about that. That was when he loses his arm. Oh, man. And it's still
Spoilers.
firing. Okay. Predator is 19 years old this year. So if you guys
Well,
haven't
that's
seen
okay.
Predator yet,
There's young ones coming up. They haven't had a chance to, to be immersed in the sci-fi world as we have.
the guy that played Hawkins, Shane Black, he's also the guy that wrote one of your favorite movies, The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Oh yeah, I love that movie.
So he's an actor as well, and he was in Predator. And he also wrote the Robert Downey Jr. comeback movie with Val Kilmer.
Oh
Kiss
yeah,
Kiss Bang Bang.
yes, he has a lot of kisses in his movies.
But I love Shane Black, and anyway, he's doing a new Predator sequel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that was just announced a couple of months ago. So I'm pretty excited to see what Shane Black is going to do with Predator, and so that's going to be fun. Anyway, Comic-Con.
Incredible costumes at the Wizard World Conference.
And an incredible job by us on the Wisconsin Paranormal panel.
Yeah, and we were also with our friend J. Nathan Couch of Goatman fame.
And you have heard Jay Nathan on this podcast when we did our cryptozoology roundtable
That's right.
a few months back.
Should link to that in the show notes.
I think I will link to that in the show notes, which will be at othersidepodcast.com/88 is where you can find that. So Wizard World was a good time. And this week we will be talking a little bit about dystopias.
Yes. Very meaty topic.
Yes. But the thing is that one of my favorite pieces of dystopian science fiction is a TV show created by Terry Nation, who invented the Daleks on Doctor Who.
Oh.
And the show he created was called Blake's 7.
Yes, I have heard of it, but I have probably never seen it. Sorry.
That's okay.
I've seen most. I'm conversant with most geek culture. That's just one that escaped me.
Well, Blake 7 didn't start getting airplay in Milwaukee until like the late 80s. So you were already in college. Like when it started being shown, and they'd show it right after Doctor Who on Sundays.
Okay, well that makes sense then.
So I would watch Doctor Who every Sunday. It was on at noon or whatever, and then at 1:30 or 2 o'clock, whenever Doctor Who ended, Blake 7 would come on.
Oh, I see.
And so then that's when I watched the entire series, and it's set in a future where there's a federation that rules Earth and parts of the galaxy, but this is not a benevolent federation like Star Trek.
Oh, I see.
It's an evil federation, totalitarian, authoritarian government that controls humanity with an iron fist and pacification drugs and memory replacement and things like that.
Oh, so kind of like they had a similar government structure in Firefly.
Yes, I mean I would say that Blake 7 is a good example of an influence that was on Firefly.
Oh wow, okay. Well, I should go back and watch it then.
I believe you should go back and watch it. I think you should put it on your. I think everybody should put it on their geek list. Now, something I tweeted last night actually was that there can never be a gritty reboot of Blake 7. Like people talk about Battlestar Galactica like it was a gritty reboot.
Yeah.
You can't gritty reboot Blake 7 because you can't get any grittier than it was originally. So, of course, any British science fiction from before the 2000s, you're going to have to set your suspension of disbelief on high because the special effects look like they were made in a high school drama department's basement.
Like something you'd be behind?
Yes. Yeah. And
some harebrained scheme? That's great.
But the thing is, it's a great show, and the character... Blake was the leader of the 7, and Raj Blake was his name, and the actor that played him, Gareth Thomas, passed away this week at the age of 71 in the UK.
Oh no, another necrolog.
Yeah,
that must be why I'm on the podcast. Someone died.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge Gareth Thomas because I really love Blake 7, And we don't have to get into it too much. The last kind of piece of genre sci-fi that I saw him in is that he was in an episode of Torchwood back in the first season of Torchwood in 2006. So if you guys remember anything about Torchwood, Torchwood is 10 years old now, which, holy crap.
That cannot be right. That cannot be right. Oh, no.
Yeah, because Torchwood started like right around Doctor Who's third season.
Old age is creeping in. That was
Yes,
just like
it is.
yesterday when I was watching Torchwood and thinking it was
Right.
just too sexy.
Well, that also means that John Barrowman, who plays Captain Jack on Torchwood, he's playing an immortal character. And if they're going to shoot any more Torchwood episodes, they better do it soon because John Barrowman is in his 50s.
No way.
Yeah, and he still looks good.
He's well preserved.
Because he's on the Arrow. I don't watch many of the CW comic book shows, but I know that.
Oh, I didn't know he was on Arrow.
Yeah, he's got a recurring part. I think he'll be my series regular now on Arrow as a character, Malcolm Merlin. Anyway, enough about Torchwood, which is a great show. That'll get its own show sometime. We talk about maybe the real life sci-fi or real life paranormal stories that have inspired shows like Torchwood. But so RIP to Gareth Thomas. Thank you for Blake 7 and the great work you did on that TV show because I loved it. It was one of the wonderful dystopian futures that shaped my childhood.
So sweet.
Yeah. Well, anyway, speaking of dystopian futures, this week is something that I think is pretty topical, and it's something that's been in the news a lot over the past few weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure why it's kind of taking off. This story is taking off a life of its own right now, as opposed to, next year, or, maybe it's because everybody's got their eyes on politics and the economy and employment.
And we're looking forward to big changes, maybe.
Yeah. And I think that's why people are focusing on employment right now because of the presidential election. So what they're thinking about now is robots are going to take our jobs.
You can have it. I think
Right.
I think most people would say that they're ready for robots to take their jobs and just have one big long vacation. That's what
Well, that's so
your life
you
is a
can't wait.
big long vacation.
So you can't wait until robots take our jobs.
That's right.
People are worried about immigrant labor and things like that taking our jobs. And I'm on the west side of Madison right now, and immigrant labor, we have interestingly enough, people think like, oh, immigrants going to take the low paying jobs and stuff like that. But here on the west side, with a lot of technology companies and software companies, it's not low paying jobs. It's computer development and software jobs where a lot of people are coming from India. And I used to work at a company where I'd say, there was a good 40 to 50% of the programmers were Indians. And it's great for me because I love Indian food and the west side of Madison is full of some great stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that I'm like, come on over, guys. Like, let's take
Bring
these
your
software
culture.
jobs.
Bring me a sari to wear.
I love it.
I'm gonna be wearing saris all the time on my never-ending vacation.
Right. People say, oh, they worry about immigration. Well, I'm not worried about immigration I'm worried about robots.
Well, I say take this job and shove it into your positronic matrix. Yeah.
What is, going to happen? Here's a good quote from the CEO of a company called Autodesk. And I actually used to work for a company that sold Autodesk software.
Fascinating.
And they do a lot of computer aided. they used to do a lot of computer aided design.
You're still my little brother. I can give you a hard time.
Yes, you can. It's okay. So the CEO of Autodesk says, the factory of the future will have only 2 employees, a man and a dog. The man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to keep the man from touching the equipment. Yeah! So, a factory of no employees, manufacturing jobs, and driving jobs, and things like that. So the there was a 2016 economic report of the president. And this is no longer in the realms of, science fiction. When you think about future jobs, I mean, I think like most people, my first thought about future jobs is the Jetsons.
Yes, pushing those buttons.
Right.
I could push your buttons all day.
So what did George do? George sat in his office, his feet were up, and he would just push a button like every couple of minutes.
Yeah, it reminds me of Lost again.
Right.
We're
right.
back to Lost. Push the button.
Every 108 minutes. Every 108 minutes. And so the 2016 economic report of the president, there's a chart in there. The probability of automation by an occupation's median hourly wage. And here's that's all statistics talk.
Hourly rage.
Hourly rage is, right, that's how I feel when I work.
That's more like, what goes on in the cube. You're sitting there whiling away the hours of futility and, it wells up about every hour.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, thinking about George Jetson. I know I'm taking us off track just a little bit,
okay.
but we'll segue our way back. Thinking about George Jetson, and the whole cartoonish aspect of him like pushing a button, really, when you think about it, puts it into perspective about the, futility of it all. Some of the things that we do in life as a part of our jobs, and maybe we could be doing something more significant, something that
Jesus
has more
Christ.
of an impact on the world in a positive way.
Yeah, I'm with you about 1,000% on that one, because I remember sitting in a cube, and there's people out now. If you're probably you might be sitting in a cube right now, cubicle, and listening to this podcast.
We feel your pain.
Yep, we're with you.
Yeah,
we are with you, brothers and sisters.
The only thing that used to get me through doing that is listening to podcasts and listening to old Art Bell shows, just to get me through, because I was sitting there by the computer pushing my buttons all day, and I just had to have something to some kind of connection, something bigger than myself.
Well, I tell you, last week we were discussing Purgatory, and we were discussing Dante's Inferno, and I think there's a special place in hell for the developers behind Microsoft Excel. Like, they get their own circle. Like, Excel developers, you go right here. You've ruined more lives. And the person that beats them is that little paper clip. Remember the little
oh, man.
Remember the little paper clip that talked?
Everybody loves to hate that little paper clip. And all he wants to do is bring you joy and happiness and with a little whimsy.
All he wants to do is help you put functions in a cell. Well, yeah, so that is the developers of Excel get tortured by that little paperclip for, and maybe it's purgatory. They don't have to do it forever because they didn't know what they were doing.
Maybe he just sharpens his ends. He just made of metal after
he stabs them every once, like a pitchfork. Okay, so cubicle prisoners, we are with you, and we have been there too.
Wait for the signal. All the prisoners shall be released.
So that's the thing. So now in the president's economic report of this year, they have the probability of automation by an occupation's hourly wage. So if it's less than $20 an hour, the probability of automation is 83%.
Ooh.
So, this is something people are taking seriously now, that jobs that are less than $20 an hour, the chances that eventually it's going to be taken over by a robot are pretty good. $20 to $40 an hour, the chances are 31%. So that's a lot of the cubicle people we're talking to. So that's why it might be time to run, because you do have better than a 1 in 4 chance of a machine coming and taking your job.
Get to the bunker.
Right. If it's more than $40, it's only 4%. So high-paying jobs, they don't think that yet a computer will take it over in the next 20 years. It's funny that they've been predicting this not just now. I mean, technological unemployment was actually a phrase first used by a guy named John Maynard Keynes, who was an English economist back in the early part of the 20th century. And a lot of our economic, a lot of the economic policy, they call it, Keynesian. So he made up, his ideas represent a lot of our modern economic policy. His ideas were that, the government spends, the more spending by the government, the more it's going to increase economic activity and things. So he would be more on the progressive side of the economic spectrum. So Keynesian economics wouldn't be like Milton Friedman and the economics of like Frederick Hayek and stuff like that. And so we don't have to get deep into economic theory here, but just know John Maynard Keynes is the guy that came up with technological unemployment, and he was talking about this in the 1930s. Right. So it's been, almost 100 years ago, they were already discussing technological unemployment, and he was predicting that jobs would be automated much sooner, than 2030 or whatever. He was predicting it by like the 1970s and 1980s.
Well, he was ahead of his time. I wonder if he was a subscriber to Weird Tales.
That would be awesome if we find out that he would just read
some cross-contamination there. Maybe he was part of the H.P. Lovecraft circle.
Yeah. He's like, well, I was reading the latest Conan story last night, and after that I determined that there'll be technological unemployment once Conan kills all the people and it's taken over by machines.
Could happen.
I'm afraid your job is made redundant because Conan has stabbed you. So this has been around for a while, and it goes even further back. Now, you've heard the term Luddite before, haven't you?
Oh, yes. One of my favorite terms. I try to pull it out whenever possible. Accuse people of being a Luddite. Right. You do.
Well, whenever somebody talks about a millennial on their cell phone, it's like, those millennials, all they do is text. And you want to say, like, don't be such a Luddite. So,
oh, yes. So well, that's been in the news recently that AMC Theaters is thinking about allowing texting during movies. I don't know how I feel about that, Mike.
It depends. As long as I'm not sitting by the person who's doing the texting, I think it's fine.
Oh, so they should have their own area, maybe.
Yeah, like the texting section.
Yeah.
And it should be right in front of the screen.
That's right.
It should be the seats that nobody wants. It's like, yeah, you can text, but you are actually sitting behind the screen.
That's a perfect idea. You've solved all our problems, Mike.
Thank you. I do what I can. So Luddites, so the early part of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, they started to get automated sewing machines, and they, use steam engines and stuff like that, and it would automate sewing. And textile workers then, who had worked, and trained all of their life to be able to do sewing in these big clothing, garment manufacturing factories.
Oh, and we all know those jobs were great.
Yes, totally sweet jobs. But the thing
we're sorry, kids. You have to go to school. You can't get caught in the machine anymore.
Right. You can't lose an arm.
That's right. But, I gotta go to school. Sorry, go on.
But the thing is that was their job, and there was no social safety net in the United Kingdom.
There was no safety net, social or otherwise.
Right. So what's going to happen if you lose your job? You're going to go to the poorhouse.
Yes. Probably die a terrible, gritty death.
So, and
be buried in the potter's field. It just keeps coming. Man,
it's funny.
That's bad. History's terrible.
It is.
Sorry, go on.
A little tangent. I'm doing research for a haunted history tour in St. Paul, Minnesota. So number one, if you know anybody, or if you're in the Twin Cities, I know a lot of the people who listen to Darkness Radio also listen to this podcast. So if you're in the Twin Cities and have had any paranormal experiences in St. Paul, Minnesota, I would love to hear about them. I'll put a link in the show notes about it. but I'm developing a haunted history tour for St. Paul. And yesterday I was reading about the Ramsey County. St. Paul is in Ramsey County, Minnesota. And I was reading about their poorhouse. They didn't have a poorhouse. They had a poor farm.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody
Quite
would
common.
go to and they would go to the farm. And so, like, if you were indigent, you didn't have any family, if you were didn't have a job and didn't have anybody to take care of you, you went to go work in the poor farm. And then people were buried there in a potter's field on the Ramsey County Poor Farm Cemetery. There's a lot of stories about how that's haunted.
Yeah, well, in many communities across the United States, that was par for the course, and the same kind of things happen there. Sometimes these things were set up as by well-meaning people, but it doesn't always work out that way, and there's terrible suffering, and out of terrible suffering, comes ghost stories, and
Right.
It's great that you're doing that and keeping these stories alive so that history will never repeat itself.
I agree with that. And this is the time where history could repeat itself.
And the
Because-
robots are taking us all to the poor farm.
The robots are going to push us all to the poor farm. And okay, so that's the thing. So now there was a recent Slate article. Let me go grab it here.
Yeah, it's actually from a couple of years ago. That one that
Okay.
we were talking about.
So they do an interview with a researcher named Andrew McAfee. No relation to the John McAfee, the guano crazy guy who's running for the Libertarian presidential nomination.
And no relation to the antivirus software.
No relation. Well, John McAfee actually is the guy that invented the antivirus software.
Oh. So it is that guy.
Yeah, that is that guy. The guy who was he says that he's framed for the murder of somebody in like Guatemala and stuff, and he had to run for his life. And
Oh,
Anyways.
wow, I don't know this story.
yeah, John McAfee's got 70 years old, has lived a very colorful life, and he is
Oh.
running for the Libertarian Party for president. And we'll get back to actually some libertarian economic policy when we get to the end of this particular discussion. But so do an interview with Andrew McAfee, no relation to John or the antivirus. And, they ask him, well, how could automation of most people's jobs play out? And he says there's three possible scenarios. One is that the economy is going to take a hit, and that's going to take a while to work itself out. But in the end, quote, we will reach a happy equilibrium. The Industrial Revolution was great news, eventually, for British workers. Electrification of factories eventually led to a large and stable, prosperous American middle class. That pattern should give us confidence that we'll wind up in another happy equilibrium. Okay, so that's the Luddites. The Luddites were fighting against that. And actually, the first time I actually heard the term Luddite was a Doctor Who episode called The Mark of the Rani. And the Rani is causing some problems in like early 19th century England.
Oh, Ronnie.
Yeah, the Rani. And she's a female Time Lord who's come back to do experiments on the what she thinks are the primitives of early 19th century England. And she's causing all this mayhem, and they're blaming it on the Luddites.
Oh.
Who are bombing, they say they're bombing the textile factories and stuff like that. And so the automated factories don't replace their jobs.
Mm.
But what happened was eventually it all worked out. New jobs were created as the old jobs were lost. So somebody had to supervise the machines back in the old factories. And that kind of new jobs were created. And eventually it all worked out to where, when the middle class was developed, that was the best economic time for the most people in the history of humankind.
Huh.
So all of that, the Industrial Revolution led to like all the manufacturing jobs and everything, and it's when you think about the 1950s and 60s and you think about the most people having the most income. And now I'm just talking about Western society now. I'm not
Right.
talking about, at the same time, the British Empire, while they were at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution, they were also at the forefront of destroying Africa and India
Yeah.
and colonization and imperialism, which eventually, Africa is still dealing with the after effects of colonialism in trying
Right.
to bring the lifestyle of their people up. anyway, but that's a digression. That's nothing to do with the dystopia that we're talking about. It's a different
Right.
dystopia.
Right. So
instead of-
even with Ronnie and all her exploits, everything
Yes.
ended okay.
everything turned out okay.
She didn't have an
No.
army of robots, though, did she? You know, like
no,
the Cybermen.
she didn't. No,
Okay.
she controlled the minds of these different factory workers in
Oh,
the early
okay.
19th century.
Well,
And then the master showed up, and then they got into a fight, and the whole thing.
oh
you had
man.
two evil time lords with the doctor in the middle. What are you gonna do?
Oh my goodness! Like the Doctor Who sandwich.
That's my dream.
But I knew it. But Ronnie didn't have an army of killer robots at her disposal. I mean that. So
No.
it's very different what we're looking at right now.
Well, that's the thing. We're talking about scenario 2 that Andy McAfee talks about. Scenario 2 is we see successive waves: artificial intelligence, automated driving that will impact people who drive for a living, robotics that will impact manufacturing. If scenario 2 happens, the problem is a bit worse because it will be difficult for the economy to keep adjusting and for workers to keep retraining. So scenario 2, you ever see the movie Elysium?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Matt Damon?
And it was the technological haves and have-nots.
Absolutely. Like some people could get their cancer cured. I mean, that's one of the reasons that, Matt Damon wants to break through to this Elysium colony outside of the planet. And everybody else lived like a third world type of existence
Right.
on Earth. So Earth was left to the plebes who were then just, their life was hell.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really scary because that seems like a very realistic scenario. It's not the one that I'm hoping for, of course, but it's the one that I think is probably most realistic.
Well, I mean, I think scenario 1's a little closer to realism because I think that people with good hearts are going to do their best to make sure that workers get retrained, that drivers find something new to do.
Well, I'm hoping so. But that like takes one of my dreams away, being this over the road trucker, and being out there, in the hinterlands of the US, driving down these desolate highways after dark, seeing strange things off on the side of the
Yeah.
road. I mean, it's its own kind of a dream, a utopia.
Living like Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China, driving your own pork chop express across the country, going from adventure to adventure.
Or I could get her an orangutan to be like, my sidekick. I
Sure, because that works so well in Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Yeah. Well, that's how
There's some more spoilers for you
That's right.
for a 170-year-old story. Murders in the Rue Morgue. The orangutan did it.
That's right.
So yes, it'd be great to have an orangutan as a little partner, and you get to hang out and stuff. And that would be Clint Eastwood, Every Which Way But Loose, when the orangutan was in there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Or isn't it BJ and the Bear another one? Wasn't that a chimp or something? I don't even know.
Yeah,
we're
I'm
going
pretty
way
sure that was a
back
chimp.
here. But wasn't that another over the road trucker thing? And the convoy.
Yeah.
And the CB radio, talking on the CB radio. Watch out for them smokies.
That is a dream to be able to go back to that 1970s. Oh, there was a period in the 1970s where truckers were heroes for a while.
Yeah, we can really see that going back and looking at all the media iterations.
Even Chuck Norris was a trucker hero in the movie Breaker Breaker.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, Breaker Breaker.
So if Chuck
Convoy.
Norris was in it,
Yeah, it's good.
it's not even a question.
So scenario 2 is is like a nightmare world. It's I think of that. I think of the dystopia from Max Headroom.
Oh, yeah.
People just living, basic, or even The Running Man. When you think of the rabble in the streets and homelessness and there's just no jobs for anybody.
Yeah, and then, the Running Man, everybody becomes dispensable.
Right. Life gets to be very cheap when you have an underclass. And so scenario 2 is obviously the scary dystopia that we're all worried about.
Yeah.
The idea that there's no jobs to have, so everybody's on the dole, and they need the bread and circuses.
Mm.
They need to be appeased with the gladiatorial combat. So on one hand, scenario 2 sounds horrible because we're not going to have jobs. On the other hand, scenario 2 means that we might get the Running Man in real life.
Uh-oh.
Which I don't know, like
Mike.
come on, like that stuff sounds awesome. It's like yeah. Anyway,
You're interested in gladiatorial combat
I just love that movie.
as a spectator?
Well, yeah, more than American Gladiators because you up the stakes a little bit.
Just a little.
So scenario 2 sounds horrible. Now scenario 3 is what he says though, is that we finally transition into the science fiction economy where you just don't need a lot of labor.
This is sounding good.
Yeah, and I think that sounds like the dream that we were talking about where
Tell
you don't
me
have
more.
Okay, now that's a utopia, not a dystopia. And that can be like Star Trek. You know, Star Trek, everybody does stuff, but nobody needs money. And that's
Yeah.
because you have an infinite amount of resources because they have replicators. So if you're hungry, you just go to the replicator to get lunch. And
Or Earl Grey tea, black.
yes.
Or Earl
Make
Grey tea. What did they say? Yeah, Earl Grey tea.
Yeah, black.
Yeah, black. No sugars. He wasn't a sugar guy.
No, not Captain Picard. No sugar for that man. Sometimes I like to rub sugar.
No,
sugar
Earl
all
Grey
over my-
tea hot. It's coffee
Hot,
black.
okay.
Earl
So
Grey
he used
tea
the
hot.
sugar. He just rubbed sugar all over his bald
He
head.
doesn't want iced Earl Grey. Come on. Who do you think he is? He needs it hot.
That's
Earl
right,
Grey
it should be
tea
hot.
hot. I got it.
So Star Trek that's one kind of utopia that could happen with something like this. It's like, oh man, that'd be great. Like you just don't have to worry about stuff. On the other end, it could be like the idyllic existence that H.G. Wells talks about in The Time Machine.
Oh, wait
And
a
that-
second.
So the LOI just sat around, didn't have to do anything, and they eventually became sheep, pretty much, who
Yeah.
would then be harvested by the Morlocks living underground who did all the
Right.
work.
That's scary. That they
Well-
come up and punch you down to the underworld and rip you to shreds.
Well, yeah, and you get eaten. I
Aw.
mean, you become and then the LOI would just get harvested every once in a while, and then they would just go right back into their idyllic existence. Just, like, oh yeah, that happens sometimes. Like, what happens? Well, these mutants come up from the underground, take a whole bunch of people, and then we just go back to laying around in the sunshine all day, kind of like I'm doing today.
Okay, there's pros and there's cons.
Well, the other con of the machine overlords is the Matrix,
Oh, yes.
because in the Matrix movie they use humans as batteries
Yeah.
to power the machines, and so in that they said that when the humans were plugged into the Matrix, the first existence was idyllic, and they tried to give people paradise. All right? So when they tried to give people paradise, humans couldn't handle it. You needed
Yeah,
to
they
have
got- Got bored.
Yeah, you got bored. You need to have some kind of struggle in your life to give it some kind of meaning. So the Matrix is another example of, okay, the machines will take care of you, but here's what's going to happen. You're going to be plugged in. And that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. There's also that movie, Open Your Eyes. It's a Spanish film, Penelope Cruz, and it's about, I feel bad for spoiling this film, but I didn't like it, so I don't mind spoiling it.
Okay, go ahead.
So if you haven't seen Open Your Eyes, fast forward about 2 minutes.
Yeah, lay it down. Lay it down for me.
You find out that the main character has been in some kind of horrible accident and is just living in this dream world in his head. Like he's in some kind of suspended animation and he's living in a dream world in his head where everything's cool.
Uh-huh.
And they did a remake of it. Tom Cruise starred in it called Vanilla Sky.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing. It's like, well, would you be happier in a kind of paradise that wasn't real? Or would you be happier living with the struggle of everyday existence? So that's where we could go with dystopia, the dystopia we're talking about. Or it could be like we talked about before, Richard Brautigan's poem.
Yes. All watched over by machines of love and grace.
And just to reread that is here's just a kind of his poetry. I like to think it has to be of a cybernetic ecology where we're free of our labors and joined back to nature, returned to our mammal brothers and sisters, and all watched over by machines of love and grace.
I love it. Let's do it. I want
Yeah.
that one. That's the one.
Back to the jungle. And I'm happy to go back to the jungle because, especially if we get to live in a tropical environment.
Yeah. Well, I think it's supposed to be the new Eden.
Yeah, and that's the idea. So that's maybe that'll happen. The science fiction utopia of robots take care of the crap work that none of us want to do, and then we get to hang out all day and just pursue higher-minded ideals.
Yeah, pursuits that are more motivating for us, that really mean something to us, that give something back to our culture. And I think we're at a moment in history where, that could really happen if jobs slowly went away or lessened, because people already are becoming media creators with all the technology available to them. They can podcast like we're doing right now, or make movies, or, different types of art. And for most people, I think that's really what they want to do. But they can't because of, limitations economically.
Well, and that's why I think a lot of people talk about technology. Technology is the new rock star. Back when like rock and roll culture and counterculture in the 1960s, it's because these musicians, were expressing things that people felt. And the only way that they could express that stuff is by listening to the music and going to concerts and spending time together. The summer of love, baby. And so that was the original rock culture is kind of that. And now with technology, media is democratized so that anybody can make things. Everyone can express themselves in the way that they deem fit. We decide to express ourselves by talking about paranormal and pop culture. And that's the way that we find meaning in our life. But a lot of people, don't have the time to do that kind of thing now because they got to work some job they hate.
Yeah.
So the thing is, when the robots steal our jobs, how are we going to avoid that dystopian future of scenario number 2 and make our way to scenario number 3 when we're all watched over by machines of love and grace?
Yeah, where we're ushered into a new era, a new renaissance. Just think of that. All the possibilities.
And this is where we get back to the libertarian economic policy that I was talking about before. And the first time I'd ever heard about this particular concept was actually from a economist by the name of Milton Friedman. Now, Milton Friedman is cited by a lot of conservative political candidates and things like that. And of course, Ronald Reagan talked about him all the time and stuff. But at the same time, these candidates also espouse some strange ideas about it, because Milton Friedman was a hardcore libertarian in that he believed in free markets. And the only way to really, make the free market and make sure that nobody is left behind so that they can compete was a universal basic income. Now, what does that mean? That means that we all get a check every year to make sure we're living above the poverty line. And then whatever work we decide to do above that, well, then we get to keep that money too. So the idea
I
is,
like that.
Yeah, and this is what I like it too, because the idea is you're making sure that everyone can eat, can feed, can clothe themselves, can be, have shelter and have somewhere to live and stuff.
Yeah, and can be in a position, like J.K. Rowling when she was living on the dole, where she was able to survive and, come up with a Harry Potter series.
Right.
Just think, there's other J.K. Rowlings out there.
Well, and I think that's interesting too. And of course, on the See You on the Other Side podcast, we do not espouse any political beliefs. We just discuss them, and we don't endorse any political beliefs. We just discuss. The only thing we endorse is that we don't want to be killed by robots.
That's right. And we don't want robots to enslave us and then, sell us like cattle to aliens. I mean, I think that would be bad also.
Yeah. So we here at See You on the Other Side podcast take a hard line on the robot takeover. But when it comes to human politics, we try to stay out of it. But the universal basic income was, they actually tried to work on this in the 1970s under, and you won't believe this, the Nixon administration.
Really?
Yeah. They also tried to do universal health care under the Nixon administration.
No, I didn't know that.
Well, they were talking about the public option and things like that. Nixon also created the EPA. So as it's
So-
weird that
Yeah, he doesn't get his props. I mean, he did do good things as well.
right. I mean, he also lied to the American people, and that
Yeah,
and you
that's
can't-
what overshadows the good things that he did.
you can't do that.
But
they
when
ch-
you
know,
get power and you want to keep it, it makes people do crazy things. They
well,
lose their judgment.
it certainly does. But he also started the war on drugs, so you can't say that. Right. So you take the good with the bad.
Right.
But what came out of that discussion of the universal basic income was the earned income tax credit in the U.S. And we're thinking about it this week because, the earned income tax credit, we probably were just all doing our taxes this week.
Ugh. I want robots to take care of all the accounting.
Yes, I do too. There's no reason that it should be this
Any
difficult.
forms whatsoever, I can't look at a form.
Absolutely. Have the robots handle it.
They're made for looking at forms.
So that minimum basic income, so everybody has enough to survive. I mean, that might be some way. So they just showed driverless cars are safer than human-driven vehicles. All right? And this is actually funny. They're testing out these driverless cars in Milton Keynes, United Kingdom. So not John Maynard Keynes, but Milton Keynes is a city in the UK. And they're trying out driverless cars. And it's producing zero emissions. They're autonomous vehicles. And they're finding that the driverless cars are way safer than the cars with drivers. Driverless cars don't check their Facebook.
That's right.
Driverless
And
cars.
the people in them could, though.
Yeah, the people in them could. I mean, I can't wait for driverless cars because, in the band, we've had to make a lot of long drives, a lot of times in the middle of the night. In the past, everybody's done an all-night kind of road trip or something like that. But when you're in a band, you do that all-night kind of road trip all the time. And,
Yeah.
some bands can afford drivers. Some bands cannot.
Yes.
And the ones that can, and I don't know who those bands are, but the ones that cannot have to end up sometimes driving all night, or you drive when you're tired, and all those kind of things. So we've tried, as we've gotten older, that's something we definitely try to eliminate. On our last tour, we made sure that no drive was over 8 hours kind of thing, and that we didn't drive in the middle of the night. But in the past, it would be, okay, we're driving to San Antonio. Great. When will we get there? Oh, right before the show. When are we leaving?
Oh.
Like 8 o'clock tonight.
Oh,
so-
can't
Yeah, that-
believe you could do that.
Right.
You're
that kind of
amazing to
stuff.
me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Amazing.
But
And
that's
be able to perform and have the energy that you put out on stage.
well, that was a while ago. I wouldn't do that anymore. But the thing is, because I realized that's dangerous. They say that driving tired is more dangerous than driving drunk.
Huh.
Studies have shown that your reaction time is way slower when you're tired than it even is when you're intoxicated. So, number one, if you're listening to this in the middle of the night and you need to pull over and take a break, I understand. Just go to that rest stop. Close your eyes for a little bit. Don't just rely on 5-hour energy drink to keep you alive.
Yeah, good point. And really, if we had driverless cars, then we could take our eyes off the road and train them on the haunted borderlands. See if
Right.
anything strange is coming up out of the moors.
If there's any bipedal canines roaming around out there, it's
There could be.
what I would like them to see. But no, I mean, and that's the thing. So the minimum income, and they're doing an experiment right now in Sweden. Like, Sweden already has pretty sweet artist welfare. You're talking about J.K. Rowling being able to write Harry Potter when she was living on the British dole. We played with a band out of Sweden a few years ago, and every artist got like 5 years of economic assistance. So they could work on their art pretty much for 5 years. And it was a husband and wife team, and they were living on her income for 5 years, her economic assistance, and then they were waiting and then he could live on his. They could live on his afterwards. So they had 10 years to work on their dream of playing music and expressing themselves and getting out to the world. And they weren't just sitting around smoking weed and doing nothing all day. They were out touring the United States. They got to open up for Pearl Jam. They got to do a variety of different things and, live a dream.
And really put themselves out there.
Yeah, and they got to live that because of that guaranteed assistance. Now, I'm not saying it's a great thing or a bad thing, but what I'm saying is they got to do that.
It's another way. It's another choice that we could make as a society.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta say, when you think about going to those gray, very pale cubes every day, you know, looks like a pretty good option.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does. And so this would be a science fiction utopia. Number one, nobody sleeps in the street. You know, families aren't forced out of anything. Will people waste their money on drugs and alcohol? Yeah, people waste their money now on drugs and alcohol. And so, I mean, why I don't think it's popular is it also would dismantle the entire social safety net we already have in the United States. So there wouldn't be any unemployment insurance or welfare or food stamps or things like that. But you just get a check every year, and then you'd be able to create podcasts all day or make YouTube videos or do things. And then if you want to work and earn more money, you absolutely can. And I don't think people would stop working. You know, there was they tried this also in Denver in the 1970s. They tried like a pilot program of this. And they found that it did not decrease people working.
Yeah, and I think it would increase buy-in in the workplace because you know that you're safe. Okay, you're saying it takes away the economic safety net, but I don't think so. I just think it stretches it over everything. You know, everyone has a economic safety net at all times, you know, when you're getting a check every year. And so it helps you to try different things, you know, because a lot of times it's like you make a choice career-wise, and then you feel like stuck in that career because, I mean, it's going to really impact you economically to just quit and try to do something else. I mean, it's a lot to make that transition. So if you have this wage, you know, that you're getting every year, you can do that. It can help sustain a lot of creativity and a lot of choices that are more informed.
Well, and I think also it would encourage entrepreneurship because if you don't have to, if you're not tired from working a crap job all day, then you go home and you have ideas. You want to start a business, and it's a great opportunity to start businesses or a great opportunity to program that app you always wanted to, but you just don't have time. And that would be a utopia to free people up with a basic, you know, so you don't have to worry about your basic needs. And when they talk about happiness scales, like right now in the U.S., I think it's something they say that if you make more than like $80,000 a year or something like that, the happiness levels between people who make more than $80,000 a year and up to the people who make $1 million, $10 million a year, that's not any different. So it's that threshold. I mean, I'm not saying that we should give people $80,000 a year checks, but what I'm saying is when people are done worrying about their basic needs, whether they're rich or whether they're middle class, the problems seem to be the same. So the happiness levels don't change. Just because you make $10 million a year does not make you any happier than if you make 80. And I think that if we go back to like Jeremy Bentham and the utility of, you know, when you say that, the thing that does the best good for the most amount of people, and this is, now we have to go back to Enlightenment philosophers for this one.
Okay, here we go.
But the idea is that you try to do things that will be the best for the greatest amount of people. And that's what something like this would espouse. And I think that's why it's popular in economic thought, because once people don't have to worry about their basic needs, then the free markets can go crazy. You know, then you don't have to have all these restrictions on companies. In that way, you probably still have to have environmental restrictions.
Oh, yeah.
So they don't
destroy everything.
And I don't know that they necessarily would, because I'm looking at this beautiful day outside here in springtime in Wisconsin, and you know, we want to make sure we protect those things. But anyway, universal basic income is one way that has been suggested, and there's a whole bunch of articles on it right now. So it's a really hot topic of people discussing it, and because of the pilot program going on in Sweden. And so what I have to say to Luddites is, bring it on. That kind of thing. So technological unemployment, it might be rough in the short term, but hopefully we'll do the right thing and figure out a way for the robots to do the stuff that we hate and humans to be able to live creative and fulfilling lives, even while all we have to do is push buttons.
All right, sign me up, Mike.
Okay, sounds
ready.
Good. That sounds good. So, Allison, I wanted to thank you very much for joining me again today as we discuss a little bit of pop culture, science fiction, and science reality. I mean, automation of 80% of jobs is in the president's report. So, like,
So it's a very hot topic today.
this is happening.
It's happening.
Like, the future is coming. No matter how many Unabombers are out there, we can't stop it.
That's right.
So instead of stopping it, we have to find the best way for people to be able to still enjoy their lives, put food on the table, and at the same time, they don't have to risk their lives in the mines anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm ready. I'm ready, Mike.
I am ready to. And so
It's been my pleasure being on the podcast. Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you. And so if you want to learn more about what Allison does, please check out MilwaukeeGhosts.com. And that's where you can find out more information on the ghost tours and investigations that Allison does in southeastern Wisconsin. For the song this week, we decided to grab an old Sunspot chestnut about, humans have to feel things and robots don't. So in this song, the character would prefer not to feel, he'd prefer to live like a robot. Instead of the puppet wanting to be a real boy, the real boy just wants to become a puppet. And the song is called Uncanny Valley.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
Well, I say take this jab and shove it into your positronic matrix. Yeah.